Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Jack Hagel. A ruling in a North Carolina lawsuit could impact thousands of women who suffer from endometriosis. A federal judge in Raleigh recently ruled that the condition that affects 10% of women can qualify as a disability for legal protections. Advocates say that clears the way for women to receive accommodations at work or school. WRAL state government reporter Will Doran covered the ruling, and he joins us now. Will, welcome back.
Nice to talk to you.
Will, I want to start with the federal law that frames this case. It's the Americans with Disabilities Act. What does it protect, and what disabilities does it cover?
Yeah, so most people probably know this as the ADA. It's been the law for decades now, got a little bit of a boost back in 2008, but it essentially says that people with disabilities need to be protected, whether that's in the workplace or in school, just in daily life. And if they have reasonable accommodations that their employer, whoever, can make to help them cope with these disabilities, go about life as normally as possible, then those accommodations need to be made. And it sets out, framework for how people can prove that they are disabled, how they can kind of work with their employers on getting these accommodations, because, different jobs require different kinds of things. Someone who's a software accountant is going to have different responsibilities than someone who's an oil rig worker, in terms of if you need to, work remotely for things, for instance, or, have, not carrying big, heavy objects. And so it's a lot of, very kind of case-specific rules, but the general idea is that we should be helping people who have disabling things in their life still be able to participate in society, go to work, be productive.
Now, some of the things that the ADA covers are things like paraplegia or some intellectual disabilities. But as we learn in this case, some debilitating conditions aren't recognized as disabilities, right?
Correct. So this case is all about endometriosis, which is a condition that affects women, and it's really when you have your menstrual cycle, it can be incredibly painful, just severe nausea, and it doesn't affect all women. It's obviously not a comfortable thing. I'm sitting here as a man saying that. But for some people, it is far worse than others. And that can be because of endometriosis. It can just convey in this really severe manner. And so that is not officially covered under the ADA. But this judge's decision said that because of the facts in this case, because it can be so severe, then yes, it should qualify as being disabling. And so that was actually, according to both the attorney in this case and also some advocates I spoke to who aren't involved in the case, the first time that ruling has ever been handed down here in North Carolina. It's actually one of the first times that it's happened anywhere in the country. There's a few examples of cases in other states, in far-flung parts of the country, but really nothing in kind of this mid-Atlantic, southeast region of the country has ever actually recognized this as a disability. So it's pretty big news for people who are in the disability advocacy community, or just women who suffer from this.
Well, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll hear about how this new ruling could affect other women in North Carolina. Stick around. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. We're talking with WRAL state government reporter Will Doran about a new ruling in a disability rights case. Will, this case was brought by a woman named Christian Worley. Tell me about her argument.
She's a really interesting person. She's actually a law student right now, and she's mounting her own defense. She's pro se, so she's her own attorney, which is definitely one way to get an education how the law works. But she used to be a state employee, and this stems from her employment with the State Department of Public Safety. She was a juvenile justice counselor for the state. So, when teens get in trouble and, courts are getting involved, she was part of that process. And she got hired on during the pandemic. It was late 2020 when she got the job. And then a couple years later, her symptoms worsen. She has to take some time off because she's had these issues, and she talks to her manager and kind of, just explains everything to her. Look, I've got this just intense pain. My job used to be 100% remote when you first hired me on. We're back in person now, but can I please just have a day or two off a month to work from home, work remotely like I used to when I'm dealing with this? And according to her, The manager started then accusing her of having poor work ethic, and then escalates it to another manager who says, well, if I let you do this, then every woman in the entire agency, which, has thousands of employees, is going to want to do the same thing as you. And, that's just not going to be realistic. And she says that they then also start mentioning, well, you're only a probationary employee right now, and we might need to fire you if you actually talk about this again. So just, shut up, go back to your job. The state disputes that conversation happened, but regardless, everyone agrees that she did not get the work from home arrangements because she resigned. She quit the day of that conversation, and then she took it up through the EEOC, which is an agency that investigates disability claims, and they kind of gave her the green light to sue. And so she sued. And so that's where we are. Right now, she's claiming that the state discriminated against her because of this disability.
So that's her side of the case. What does the state say in its own defense?
Yeah, so I asked the state to comment when I was reporting on this story, and they declined because it's pending litigation. That's pretty common. But, they have their legal filings, and a lot of it, a lot of this is a he said, she said kind of situations. Well, I had this conversation with this person, and here's my side of it. The state says, well, she doesn't have any evidence that conversation actually happened, or, our people have a different recollection of that conversation. So there's a lot of just questioning of, some of the claims she makes, did they even happen? And then there's also, plenty of procedural stuff. Did she make it, did she do enough, to say that she was disabled and to properly ask for the accommodations? And one thing that the state did tell me, while they have declined to comment on the specifics of the case, they say, look, we do have a lot of procedures in place for people to, formally identify as disabled so that people in their departments know about it. There's other forms you can use to request these accommodations. They have links online. There's web pages, on the state's HR website where you can go and find all of these things. So they say, we try to make this easy for employees, for managers to deal with so that it doesn't get to this stage, so that people can deal with this a little bit more amicably and easily without having to, have meetings and possible litigation.
Now, any large organization probably faces some employment-related lawsuits. Does the state have any kind of reputation in terms of how it treats disabled employees?
Yeah, the state definitely does face lawsuits like this about disability claims because it employs so many people. But I talked to Lena Welch. She's an attorney for Disability Rights North Carolina, and they are kind of the group that goes after the state when people are complaining about disability discrimination. And she said they actually don't really have a bad reputation. And in fact, she pointed to an executive order that former Governor Roy Cooper signed in 2019 that made North Carolina what they call an employment first state, which is a term in the disability community that basically says we are going to go out of our way to help out disabled people in the state find jobs in state government, to actively recruit when we can, to make sure our managers are trained on these issues, to have policies in place to help employees who do have disabilities. And so she said that the state has a lot of resources. I mean, they spend billions of dollars on their staff each year, and she said they actually tend to do a pretty good job of trying to address these issues before they become issues.
So now that this new ruling is out, how does it affect other women who suffer from this condition?
Yeah, that is the complicated question. People like Lena Welch, disability rights advocates, are really excited about this case, like I said, because it is the first time that a federal judge in North Carolina has ever said that, yes, endometriosis can be disabling. But that's not necessarily a green light for every woman who suffers from this. And that's just because of the very complex nature of disability law, the way it works. Like I mentioned earlier, a lot of it is very case specific. It depends on your specific symptoms, your specific job duties. All of these different sort of things can come into play. So it doesn't necessarily mean that every single woman in the state who has endometriosis is immediately eligible for accommodations and can sue if she doesn't get accommodations. But it is a sign that, people can point to. And it's also just a sign that judges are becoming a little bit more amenable to these kinds of arguments than they have in the past. Things are modernizing a little bit.
So what's the state's next move? Can they appeal?
Yeah, so this is, definitely still ongoing. There is, mediation that can still happen. They might reach a settlement with her, or this might end up going to a trial for a jury to decide as well. So there's still plenty that can happen here. But for right now, the state had been trying to have. She had 7 different claims. The state had been trying to have all 7 of those thrown out, and the judge is allowing 6 of them to proceed. So in general, it's pretty good, sign for this case, at least for right now. So we'll see what happens. Definitely still a lot of moving parts to this one, but advocates are excited no matter how this individual case turns out.
Well, we know you're going to be keeping close tabs on this one. Thanks, Will.
Thank you.
That's WRAL State Government reporter Will Doran for his coverage of the Worley case. Go to the NC Capital section of WRAL.com. I'm Jack Hagel. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and for making us part of your morning routine. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email with Triangle news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.